All right, here we are. It is Friday, and we are ready for the word for today. Word for you today is Friday, October the 4th, and they gave us a passage at 2 Kings, chapter 3, verse 11. And so I'm going to read it to you real quick. Jehoshaphat said, "Is there no prophet of the Lord here, that we may inquire of the Lord by him?" And one of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, "Elisha, the son of Shaphat, is here, who used to pour water on the hands of Elijah." And in verse 12 it says, "And Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him." So they went down to him, is what happens there. Now, what I want us to do is get a little bit of back history on this. See, Jehoram, he's a wicked king over the nation of Israel. And he was doing things in the sight of the Lord that were just evil. And what happens is he was not quite as bad as his father and his mother. So we give him a half-hearted, maybe a little bit of effort that he was doing here, because his father and mother was Ahab and Jezebel, the most wicked ever, just about. But he did some good things. He did remove the pillar of Baal that Ahab had made. So he wasn't a diehard Baal worshiper, and he unfortunately did sin with false worship that he had set up and established in Bethel. So the details of Jehoram, it's important for us to understand for our lesson this morning, because Jehoram, even though he was a little bit better than his parents, he still wasn't quite good enough to move the needle a whole lot. As a matter of fact, the nation was still under judgment from what Ahab and Jezebel had done before him. He still had the worship in Bethel going on, and we know that it was still under judgment because even Elisha was rejected when he went to Bethel to worship. I mean, Elisha, he is one of the most famous prophets of God at this time. And then the second thing we need to see is in verse 4 about the history here, is that the king of Moab had been paying this staggering tribute to King Ahab. He had been paying 100,000 lambs and wool of 100,000 rams, okay? So they've kind of got their thumb on him. It's kind of like you pay, right? You pay us and we leave you alone, okay? That's kind of how it's going here. But then Ahab dies, and his son Ahaziah becomes the king, and he reigned for 2 years. He dies. So the next son of Ahab takes over. That's our story about today, Jehoram. He becomes the king. So now Moab, they seize the opportunity to get out from under this burdensome tribute. So it says in verse 5 that the king of Moab, Mesha, he rebelled against the king of Israel, which is our Jehoram. And what they've done is they just quit giving. They quit giving the tribute. Well, Jehoram, not happy with this, so he falls right into the footsteps of his father. He gets ready to prepare for battle, but he does the same thing this father never would have done. He doesn't seek the Lord immediately. Instead, he musters up his troops and he goes out to fight against Moab. Well, as he does, he remembers what his father had done, who asked Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, to help fight with his battles. Jehoshaphat had helped defeat the Syrian army. So Jehoram says, Jehoshaphat, would you be willing to help us as you helped my father? And he says, yes, we will go to battle against Moab. We are one. So Jehoshaphat's response was the same as he had done with the Ahab. Yes, we're going to do it. We're going to battle together. The difference here is that previously Jehoshaphat had inquired of the Lord before they went into battle. This time, neither Jehoram nor Jehoshaphat chose to inquire of the Lord. They both simply gathered their troops, they made their battle plans, and then they went out into the wilderness of Edom to attack the nation, the country of Moab. Now the king of Edom, though, as they're coming through the wilderness there, he doesn't like the king of Moab. So he joins with them. He's happy to do battle with them. So he joins his troops with their troops. Now we got 3 armies marching for 7 days through the wilderness. The only problem is here, after 7 days of marching through the wilderness, they find that there's no water for the army. There's no water for the animals. Their food rations are running out. And as a matter of fact, the king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, declares in verse 10 that the Lord has, or Rehoboam says, the Lord has brought us out here to die at the hand of Moab. Quite an interesting observation. I'm not sure that it was the Lord that brought them out there, but that's what they said. Now in verse 11, where we pick up, Jehoshaphat spiritually wakes up. He asks, is there not a prophet of the Lord here that we can inquire of? These three kings and their armies, they're all doomed as they've marched into this wilderness of Moab. And now they decide to seek God's will. Now, before we go any further, the question I had when I read this is, how often do we do this in our own lives? How often do we see certain circumstances? Do we make decisions? Do we carry on with our own plans only to realize, hey, we're in trouble? And then we cry out to the Lord for rescue. I mean, how many times do we forge ahead with our own plans and we've tried to live out our lives, and yet we find ourselves leaving God behind, only at a certain point coming back to God when we realize that, hey, we had decided to leave the Lord's guidance and to leave his teachings. I'll be honest with you. I hate those times when I come to the end of my day and I think to myself and I look back and I say, Lord, where were you? Yeah, I mean, those to me are the most frustrating times of my life, just to be honest. I go places and I did things all through the day, and it's not like the favor of the Lord wasn't with me, because God is faithful. God is always good. But what happens is I missed the fellowship of his presence through the day. I missed the comfort of his divine knowledge and his divine leadership as I went through my day. Why? Because I didn't seek him. I didn't seek his leadership in all that I do. So before we condemn Jehoram and Jehoshaphat too much, I think we should consider, how often do we put ourselves in similar circumstances because we did not seek the will and the presence of the Lord before we press forward with our own plans and our own desires. So I think my recommendation from this lesson, what I've learned here today, is we probably all need to remember to work a little harder at saying the Lord first. At the beginning of the day, we need to put it on our heart, on our mind, and our tongue, the Lord first. Have a great day.